First of all, talking to our author today is Emmy Yates. She's a Milwaukee-based writer, artist, amateur naturalist, and most importantly, to me at least, a licensed urban beekeeper. Love that. Blythe Roberson is a comedian. She's a humor writer and the author of How to Date Men When You Hate Men. She's written for The New Yorker, Cosmopolitan, Kinfolk, and more. Thank you so much for being here, Emmy and Blythe.
Hi, everyone. Oh my God, thank you all so much for coming. Emmy and I grew up together. We have known each other our entire lives since I moved into her neighborhood and saw her playing out my window and was like, maybe she'll be friends with me. So
Didn't work out.
yeah, now she hates me. So I'm going to read from this book. I'm going to read the introduction. I feel like it speaks for itself, so let's just jump right in. All right. There are only so many poems you can read about being free. Only so many times you can listen to Joni Mitchell's travel album, Hejira, before something inside you snaps. On January 17th, 2019, Mary Oliver died, and I sat at my office desk ignoring my work to read her poem, Moments, about actually living your life when you're alive, about how the lamest thing you can possibly do is be cautious. Fuck, I thought, I gotta quit my job. That was the moment I decided, and 2 months later, I did. And then, as you legally must after quitting your job, I went on a great American road trip. For years, I had fantasized about going on a huge road trip, but of course I never could. Those were the years when I began to credibly claim that Google Maps was my favorite website, since for fun, I would plan elaborate road trips that never came to fruition. Usually I design my theoretical trips with the idea of writing something about them. Early on, I envisioned doing a road trip where I visited every man I had ever had feelings for in order to interview them, aka make out. This idea stemmed less from the belief that this would make an interesting book than from the realization that my crushes had spread out across the country in a way that would make for an interesting drive. Then it struck me, even though I am a Puritan bitch who can't justify having fun unless I assign myself some homework to go along with it, I was allowed to take a road trip without writing about it. And so I spent the next 3.5 years taking road trips whenever I had time off work. Over those years of traveling, I thought about why I wanted so badly to drive a car across America, why I once developed a crush on a guy just because he told me about a road trip he had been on. I thought about the canonical American travel narratives that made a road trip seem like the epitome of freedom. And I wondered why there were so few canonical American travel narratives written by women, and what that meant for me, a woman who wanted to go on the road. So after my brain's attachment to a steady salary and employer-linked health insurance was thoroughly eroded, after I decided it would be sane and in fact very good to quit my job to focus on writing and being free, I decided that I wanted to write a female American travel narrative. My book would answer the question, what if Bill Bryson got his period? I didn't need to know what would happen if Jack Kerouac got his period. He would have freaked out and quit his road trip. It would have ended the Beat generation. So I would go on the road and write about it. But where would I go? A trip long enough to merit serious thought requires an organizing principle. Mine was a modified version of an optimized national parks road trip. Over the years, I had seen various articles about people who had run the numbers and figured out the mathematically best way to visit every national park in the contiguous 48 states. I wasn't sure which parks I'd end up camping at, which I'd just hike around for a few hours, and which I'd skip altogether. But I knew I wanted to use one of these algorithm-generated super maps as my general guide. I wasn't choosing to spend months on end camping and hiking as some personal dare. It wouldn't be a trial by fire in which seeing if I could lug a backpack up a mountain or sleep outside would teach me something about myself. Hiking had already taught me things about myself. For example, if I exercise for more than 5 minutes, my entire face and body turn hot pink and stay that way for the entire rest of the day. I am Irish. But being in nature feels comfortable to me and right. I'm an outdoors person. Hiking is one of maybe 3 things I truly love doing, along with playing tennis and watching network dramas about high-achieving women who drink too much. Grey's Anatomy. My love of camping and hiking can be traced back to a childhood visit to Devil's Lake. a state park in Wisconsin, about a 3-hour drive from where I grew up with Emmy. Devil's Lake is bordered by 500-foot quartzite bluffs on either shore, which for kids who grew up surrounded by the monotony of flat cornfields qualified as thrilling. One summer day, my stepdad, TB, whose real name is Tom Brandis, but whom Emmy and I at some point dubbed TB Ice because that's the kind of thing we did in the early 2000s. He sardined every child from our neighborhood into the back of his white kidnapper van and drove us to Devil's Lake for a camping trip. Not a seatbelt among us. In retrospect, maybe he chose Devil's Lake as a destination less for its majestic bluffs and more for the fact that 3 hours is about as long as you can drive with a bunch of loose kids in the back of your van and not reasonably expect to be charged with a felony. On the second day of our trip, TB took the, in my memory, dozen kids to a ranger-led nature hike. At the end of the hike, the ranger described a rock formation that anyone who was interested in could find by hiking just a 1/10 of a mile farther. After about half an hour, we started to suspect that we had gone a bit more than 0.1 miles. In fact, we had no idea where we were. TB, fulfilling his role as the only adult among us, told us we would be turning back and retracing our steps. But we 25 rowdy preteens were having too much fun. No, we screamed, we want to keep going. Tom reiterated that we were lost and needed to turn around. It's a free country, we said. Let's put it to a vote. And the children outvoted the adult 40-1. And so we hiked further into the woods. We hiked past a cleave and a giant block of quartzite, and drunk with power, we named this rock formation TB's butt crack. To this day, when I hike past it, I'm like, oh, TB's butt crack. We imagined ourselves lost forever, even though in retrospect, we likely hiked past at least one map. We hiked down a scree field that we didn't think could possibly be part of the trail, but which definitely was. It felt as if anything could happen. It was maybe the first time I felt like I was experiencing every moment as it occurred. I felt awake. And it wasn't just me. That trip instilled in all of the 400 kids present a love of sleeping on dirt. 20 years later, those neighborhood kids and I still go camping together. We hike up mountains and don't shower for a week, trying every time to get ourselves lost. The difference between those trips I regularly took with my friends and the trip I was about to embark on all alone was that I would be traveling not for a week, but for months. And crucially, I had no real idea of how many months I would be traveling. I had a list of parks and an order in which to visit them, and as far as planning goes, I had nothing else. This uncertainty for me was far more uncomfortable than sleeping on the hard ground in the middle of the desert, or, as I ended up doing just as often, sleeping in my stepdad's Prius in the middle of the desert because I felt too lazy to set up my tent. I am a planner by nature. I am high strung. I am a person who makes an 8-page Google Doc for a 1-week trip. But in the case of this trip, I flew out on a Tuesday and I had no idea where I'd be sleeping on Wednesday. Trying to exert my will on the universe for 1 week was one thing. Expecting the trip to bend to my will for months on end seemed so futile that I didn't even attempt it. Studies say that half the enjoyment of a trip comes from the planning of the trip. In this case, I guess, half the enjoyment came from seeing if I could go with the flow for one summer ever. Here's what I did know. I would start with the national parks optimized trip and modify it slightly to include only parks where I had not yet acquired a junior ranger badge, essentially a small plastic pin earned by completing a children's educational booklet. I've been obsessed with them ever since I got my first at Devil's Lake, a Wisconsin Explorer badge decorated with a mushroom. That badge has aged incredibly well in that it is a hit with all my friends who either love hallucinogens or follow mushroom foraging accounts on Instagram, which together accounts for 100% of my friends. The only reason I could plausibly get away with having no set plan for where my journey would take me was that because doing this trip meant not having a source of income, I planned to free camp every night. Only a few years before I'd learned from Emmy that you're allowed to camp for free anywhere in the only a few years before I'd learned from Emmy that you're allowed to camp for free anywhere in a national forest or on Bureau of Land Management land. There was a website too that aggregated some preferred campsites, though Emmy told me not to spread the word and risk the campsites becoming too popular. The website interface seemed to be in on the secret. It was visually discombobulating and difficult to manage. It looked like it was updated before the internet was invented. Free camping means no access to nice bathrooms. You're lucky if you find a pit toilet, which, as its name suggests, is just a toilet over a big hole in the ground. There's never any running water. Showers are obviously out of the question, but very importantly, it's free. And since free camping often requires driving deep into protected land, it can mean sleeping in staggeringly beautiful wilderness. The remoteness of most free campsites meant I would often lose access to Wi-Fi, which was, of course, part of the point of visiting natural and wild places. The years I worked as a researcher on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert overlapped with the years that Donald Trump ran for and was elected president, and then proceeded to overload the news cycle with a psychotic amount of horrible decisions and statements and scandals, thanks partly to his narcissistic personality disorder and partly to a Steve Bannon-designed psyop to desensitize Americans to misery. So for years, my job involved always knowing what Trump and his cronies were up to. I was excited to get the chance on this trip to experience the freedom of not being constantly online. As is true of so many Americans, I feel bad about the amount of time I spend looking at screens, but I also love hiking up a mountain, sitting at a beautiful vista, and checking my email. Still, I hoped I would be able to surrender myself to this trip. I hoped that for a few months I could stop missing my friends and my drama, could ignore my Pavlovian instinct to refresh Instagram 400 times a day, long enough to really experience being on the road. I suspected and hoped that if I let myself be truly present, something alchemical might happen, that what I was doing might transcend being just an obscenely long vacation, and that I would get to the center of something. For the first time in my life, I was giving myself permission to be free and permission to be a full-time writer, and I wanted to write about being free. My mind was made up. I knew I wanted to take a great American road trip. I knew a few questions I wanted to think about while I did it, though many more hadn't yet occurred to me. Questions about the park's place in the shady history that is the history of America, about the sheer number of people visiting the parks, about how many weeks one woman can drive alone in a car before she becomes very irritated or very horny or very both. I knew I had to accept, as much as I get stress hives anytime my plans are foiled, that this trip would be the boss of me and not the other way around. And so one day in the middle of spring 2019, I booked a plane ticket to Chicago. So that's the prologue. Thanks. Okay, Emmy has not previewed any of these questions to me, so let's go.
Hi, I'm Emmy. I guess just firstly, I want to say that I've known Blythe for 25 years, a really long time. And it's just been really an honor to watch you grow as a person and a writer and a woman. And thanks for asking me to do this with you.
Thank you.
Let's get freaky. Okay. All right, question number one. Let's talk about your writing process. Taking on a book, I've seen your method. I've seen your Charlie Day mailroom wall. Where do you start?
Oh gosh. Well, this book started with the idea that I would love to have Bill Bryson's career. Like, I just thought it was such a great scam that this guy got people to pay him to go on vacation and write jokes about it. So I started thinking about, like, what are the interesting elements of going on a road trip? Like, what can make it worthwhile for other people? And I started thinking, like, well, you know, I read Jack Kerouac, I read Bill Bryson. It's not a travel narrative, but Walden, like Thoreau, all these really important books about being American and being free and nature were all so male. And I thought, what is keeping women from writing that kind of book? And, you know, we have Wild and we have Eat, Pray, Love, but I was like,
Right.
well, those are both like kind of trauma based. Like, why do men get to like go have fun and women have to like be healing? I was like, I don't want to heal. I just want to like, I just want to post photos on Instagram. So, so I thought about that, and then I just feel like I opened like my aperture to the world of like anything that is related to this book. If it occurs to me, I would write it down, and I
Really stick it note heavy.
yeah, really sticky note heavy, like giant Google Doc that's like the length of a Stephen King book. And it got to the point where, this is maybe TMI, but one of my friends was talking about the pull-out method, and she was like, everyone's using the pull-out method nowadays. And I was like, so grateful, because it was the first thing I had heard in months that I was like, that's not related to my book. I don't have to put it on a sticky note. So yeah, just like I put everything that could possibly be in this book in a document, wrote it out on note cards, put it on my wall, had it truly like a conspiracy theorist wall until the exterminator came to treat my apartment and was like, cockroaches eat this, you have to take this down. And then yeah, just wrote the book and went crazy.
Yeah. How do you know when you're like getting somewhere when you're writing a book? When you're like, this is the sauce, this is
Yeah.
we're getting there.
I think this is further evidence of my insanity, but like I will make myself laugh out loud. And I'm like, oh, this is good. Or it's really good when I'm like, I gotta text someone this. That's when it feels good.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good one. Nice job. Good opener. You're doing great. Okay. At the beginning of the book, you express wanting to perform, or sorry, not wanting to perform authenticity. And kind of like we were talking about with like these male travel guides, I think of like Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie, and great book, but very stiff, very, I don't even know, planned. So I just want to dive into that. So how are some of the ways that, you know, you navigate like the pressure of wanting to like be authentic with your book?
I think I had not read this book when I started thinking about this book, but I have since read it, is like Into the Wild. I had seen the movie, which I think is like a great movie, but I was just like, I don't want to be the kind of guy. I mean, I say it in the book that like it seems like there are some guys who don't know that you can like go on a hike without first burning your social security card. And like I was not trying to like make my life harder or like pretend like I, you know, am just like a really, really hard outdoors person. Like I'm a person who likes to hike, who like lives in New York City and is not legit. Like I just am not a legit person, and I just like to go have fun. And I think like that's a valid way to experience nature that is not like the mass of men is not going to like burn all their cash and to like abandon their Yaris in like a wash in the Nevada desert. Like most people are just gonna like try to go like on a day hike, and I thought that that was an interesting place to operate from and like relatable that I hadn't seen a lot of.
So you didn't feel like you put pressure on yourself?
No,
That's
I
good.
mean, I would love I'm always trying to learn more, but I'm not trying to act like I know more than I do. It's like that thing of when you're young and someone says like a movie that you haven't seen, you're like, oh yeah. And then when you
Every conversation I have with Blythe, I don't watch anything.
yeah. But now I just feel like I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of that movie. And then people explain to me, and I don't have to remember all the movies I have lied about seeing.
There you go. In your opening thing, you were talking a little bit about the Junior Park Ranger booklet that you can, 12 and up. So even if you're 45 years old, technically, you know, you can participate in the, and we've done this a lot.
Yeah. Although I did recently go to Governor Dodge. This was probably 2 years ago now. And I tried to get a junior or Wisconsin Explorer badge. And the guy was like, if I give this to anyone over 12, I'm going to lose federal funding.
That is such bullshit.
I know. And then I was like, but I did the whole thing. Like the guy gave it to me on the way in, and then he gave me a badge anyways. And he was like, you can't tell anyone about this. So don't tell anyone.
It's weird how when you request a Junior Park Ranger booklet at a national park, they're either like, oh my God, so cute.
I know.
You're 30, or they're like, listen, I'm going to ask you like extra questions at the end, which has happened before when turning in your booklet. You're like, I did this cute coloring book and I identified bugs. And then they're going to like ask you about like, was it cryptobionic soil?
Yes.
Whatever that was.
Yeah. Emmy and I went to Arches together
This was so mean.
5 years ago, and we did our books together. And then we went to the ranger at the end, and he was on one. So he was like testing us. And there was this whole thing about living soil, which is in the book. It's really interesting. It's like the soil in the desert is actually like covered with algae and like
living soil,
living. And you shouldn't step on it because it's like the only thing keeping the desert from flowing away. So the guy was like, okay, like explain to us like why cryptobiotic soil is important. And I was like, well, it keeps the desert from blowing away. And he was like, okay, you. And
I was so dehydrated too, by the way. Like, I was so hungry.
Yeah.
And
I think you were like, it keeps the desert from blowing away.
and he's
like,
right,
just said
but
that.
not good enough. And I was like,
Yeah.
but I'm a little girl. Like, I don't, it's like bowling. So sometimes, you know, the park rangers are like, oh, this is really great. Like they want to do an activity, and sometimes they're just like ruthless. But anyways, my question is like, you have how many junior park ranger badges.
Oh, God.
Honestly.
I
maybe, like,
think I probably have 50.
yeah.
Yeah.
She gets deranged when she gets to like anywhere that has like booklet. Like you
Yeah.
get so horned up about these little booklets.
I
And like,
do.
I guess my question is to get to the point. What is your most memorable badge earned? And like where and why? It's a hard one.
This is a
'cause-
hard one. There's a lot of good parks. There was when I went to Wind Cave in the book, they were like, we have 2 junior ranger books. And I was like, great, twice the homework. This is what I love to do. And then one was just about caves. And when I brought it to the ranger to turn it in, he was like, oh, I can't believe you did this one. This one's hard. And I was like,
Wow,
grade A student. Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
And then when you earn your badge, they make you like pledge to, protect it. And the rangers either like follow the book or sometimes they like freestyle it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll be like, raise your arm. We're like, okay. And then they're like, do you love nature? We're like, yeah. And then sometimes they freestyle it and you're like, this is great. Like when
Yeah.
rangers are having like a good day,
Yeah.
other than the,
Yeah.
cryptic soil guy not having a good day.
Oh, one of the rangers
Yeah.
on my road trip was freestyling and he was like, I promise to floss. And I was like, I promise to floss.
Yeah.
And then he was like, and I promise not to argue with anyone in the car. And I was like, well, I'm alone in the car, so that should be easy. And as I said that, I was like, oh, everyone I told that I was going to go on this trip told me to a person, they were like, oh, you're going to get murdered. And I was like, I'm not going to get murdered. I know how to, defend myself. And here I was being like, hey, everyone, I'm alone in a car.
As you're like pledging also alone.
Yeah.
That kind of like goes in, this is great, into my next question. So one, we were raised by your stepdad. I consider my stepdad TB Ice. He really like ingrained in us that we would be like murdered if we were ever reckless. And
Even if we weren't.
no, yeah, his perception of reckless is like not having the buddy system at Walmart, the local Lake County Walmart. And yeah, and so he really was like, you are gonna die.
Yeah.
And like when I borrowed another Prius of his to go on one of my road trips, he gave me like 4 bear maces and a knife. And he's like, if you sleep in the car, like sleep with your eyes open, whatever. So how did you navigate being worried about not dying? I guess.
Yeah.
Like just like being a woman, you're vulnerable. Everyone's vulnerable, but like you're like alone.
Yeah.
So
this was definitely like one of the first things I thought about when I was going on the trip. Yeah, when I was born. Just because like truly it was so like, not to exaggerate, every single person either told me I was going to get murdered or told me something I could buy to not get murdered.
right.
And I was like, this is interesting. And I was primarily thinking about the trip in gendered terms at the time. So I was like, this is because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
So I think it helped me to like see it from a more zoomed out sociological level and be like, oh, like this is Adrienne Rich, I think, called it the role of male violence in keeping all women subordinate, where it's like, sure, like some women do get murdered. As it I didn't know this at the time, but women are more likely to be murdered in their home or the home of someone they know, and men are more likely to be murdered in public, and men are far more likely to be violently victimized in general. But I was like, oh, there's something, the people are not telling me I'm going to get murdered because I'm actually going to get murdered. And it's not even because they know that they're agents of patriarchy. They're unwitting agents of patriarchy, as we all are. And I was like, people told me I was going to get murdered when I moved to the city. Like people have always been telling me I'm going to get murdered. So I didn't feel actually too worried that I was going to get murdered. And there were times on my trip that I did feel like I was going to die, but it was almost always because I was like dehydrated or like or like merging poorly. Like
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you're like really bad at
I'm pretty bad
actually.
at it.
You're like super bad at that. Yeah, and as poetic, I keep touching my nose. As poetic as like traveling alone can sound, like it's incredibly lonely.
It is.
And lonely in a, even if you're like you said, I'm not working through trauma. So like you don't need like to sit in that loneliness, but like, I don't know, how do you take on the lonely scaries that I think everyone would experience being alone like that?
Yeah, I think it helped me that I was seeing friends throughout.
Yeah.
So Emmy and I, part of my trip was planned around picking Emmy up at the airport in Denver so we could visit our friend Eileen, who is a Milwaukee native, who at the time was running a ghost town in Utah that they had bought up a bunch of property and were restoring it. So it was
Mhm.
nice to know I had friends to look forward to. But when I was alone, and especially when I was alone and moving really quickly because I had to get to LA for a stupid appointment that I can't believe now that I
Made time for
made
that.
time for that. Yeah. And I was just like, why am I even doing this? I miss my friends. All my friends are at home having fun without me. This is psychotic what I'm about to say, but people would DM me on Instagram and be like, oh my God, your trip looks so fun. I'm like living vicariously through you. And I started like living vicariously through them, living vicariously through me. It made me feel good that someone thought what I was doing looked like fun and
Yeah.
reminded me that it was in fact fun to be on vacation.
That's a
So
lot of time alone with yourself.
It
That would
is.
drive me crazy.
yeah. Luckily, I didn't like really, it was pre-COVID, so I wasn't yet like fully insane. So I didn't like have any horrible thoughts, but I did think about like topics a lot. And I would be like thinking I had all these brilliant thoughts about America and recording voice memos. And I was like, well, solved America. And then I would like get out of my car 2 hours later and listen to it. And I was like, America remains unsolved.
And those were the memos I would find when I found your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently. I guess a little bit of a shift. So in your book, something I appreciate that you mentioned is the complicated history, but also beauty of national parks. They're tethered to, again, a lot of complicated history. And so I feel like there has been a shift in the National Park Service acknowledging land ties to Indigenous people, and that's something you mentioned in your book. And so there are efforts in restoring that. We've seen Alaska's Mount McKinley, which was named after a white president that never went to Mount McKinley, being restored and renamed back to Denali after the tribe of folks that like still live there. And so I think I've seen a lot of change, but I guess you're a little older than me, and sorry. You are. What kind of, I guess, shift have you seen in this? And do you feel like the white man's discovery, as you put in your book, is actually being challenged now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's been really heartening to see because I feel like a lot of change has happened really quickly. Even so, I did this trip in 2019 and I was struck by how obfuscated a lot of pre-colonialist history was, where it was just like anything relating to the indigenous people that had stewarded these places for millennia was just like very gauzy prehistory kind of stuff. And then we would get names and dates when like the first white guy came, and then and when I was traveling around, I would meet some rangers who were like, yeah, this is like really problematic, and like I don't like how the parks talk about it. And some of them were like, oh, we're like re-putting like the actual like indigenous place names on maps finally. So that was cool to see. But since obviously Trump was president when I took this trip, and then when Biden was elected, now the Secretary of the Interior is an Indigenous woman, Deb Haaland. That's the first time an Indigenous person has ever had that post. And the head of the National Park Service, Chuck Sams III, is also. So it's just like, it's been, I feel like, a lot of change really quickly. And it's still not perfect, obviously. Like, it's not like every different Indigenous nation agrees on like how land should be used. So there's actually like, there was just I forget what national monument exactly, but there was some land that was just declared a national monument, and one of the nations that had been living there was like, well, we don't want this because now we can't like extract these resources, and we were using those to like live or to like fund our life. So it's definitely like
You've seen something.
but it's like better to have actually like the people who live there involved in deciding, even if it's not like everyone agrees, than to just completely like whitewash history, I think.
Yeah, I think it was an important aspect that you had in your book. So
I read so many books. I did a lot of reading.
That's good. Okay, another question. Your book mentions a lot of friends and fellow travelers you met along the way. My question for you is, of those characters, why is Emmy your favorite? And what do you like most about her? Thank you.
I mean, yeah, her beauty for sure. And you know, just the food she makes is so good.
Which is it mentioned in the book? Yes, it is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's mentioned that you make us dinner, and then I think you know all your astute observations.
Thank you. Well, that's it. Well, no, I'm just kidding. I do have a few more questions. Actually, we're gonna play a game, everyone. The name of the game is Kill Fuck Mary. Kill Fuck Mary is the name of the game. But because your mom and aunt are here, and honestly, I haven't recovered since Sherry like yelled at me for putting you in a headlock when we were like 8. So you forgive me now? I'm 30. You forgive me now? Jesus. Anyway, so we're gonna call it Kiss Mary. Because kissing and being married are 2 very different things. Question 1, Kill Kiss Mary. Oh wait, how the game works for those who have never played. I'm gonna say Kill Kiss Mary, and I give you 3 options. Have you played this game?
I've played it.
Excellent.
Are you kidding me? I played every day of my life.
For all the boomers out there, it's called Kill Kiss Mary. I'm gonna give you 3 options, and you're gonna choose which of the options you would. Usually it's about like people, right? But this is about not people. So you're gonna be like, I would rather like get rid of this, kiss this, or marry this.
Right.
And that's how, and it's like a grading thing. Okay, so Kill Kiss Mary National Park Edition.
Okay.
Yosemite National Park, Zion National Park, Glacier National Park. Kill Kiss Mary.
Okay, I think we are killing.
Mm-hmm.
We are. I'm gonna be canceled. We're killing America's beautiful public land.
Well, it's just least favorite.
I'm gonna kill Yosemite because it's so crowded.
Mm.
It's so crowded.
Well, they're about to do the ticketing system there now too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, this is something when I was on my trip, the amount of people in the parks was like overwhelmingly way too many people. And
Yeah.
they were like, I talked to park rangers who said they felt like they were working at Disney World. It was, and they were like, we can't even like tell people where the petroglyphs are anymore because people are just like not respecting them.
Damn.
Okay, so I'm killing Yosemite. I'm kissing Zion because
Ooh.
it's so beautiful. And I'm marrying Glacier because it has red trucks that take people
They
up
do.
the mountain.
Yeah, they look like little fire trucks, Zach.
Yeah.
They look like little. Yeah.
Shout out to our firefighter friend.
Shout out to the only firefighter we know. Okay, great, cool. So you picked Glacier because they have fire trucks.
Yeah.
Okay, Kill Kiss Mary, Joni Mitchell album edition. Blue,
Uh-huh.
Hijara,
Hajira.
Hajara, Clouds.
Okay, I'm killing Clouds because
That was quick. She's like, done. No thanks.
she's too young. I'm kissing Blue
Mm.
because it's so romantic. And then I'm marrying Hajira because it really has layers.
And you mention it in your book.
And
A
I mentioned
lot.
it in my book. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that while we're talking about it? The
Yeah.
importance of that.
Are there any
album.
Joni Mitchell Hajira fans in the audience? All right.
We got one.
Everyone needs to go home and listen to Hajira by Joni Mitchell, not streaming on Spotify because of Joe Rogan, but streaming elsewhere. It's just this book where Joni drives across the country and thinks about what it means to be a woman and what it means to be in love. And I think it's like, how can you have space for adventure and romance and great art in your life? And like, I think she's above and beyond anyone who's ever lived, I think.
She's the anthem of this book. Good one. Okay. Kill Kiss Mary, Road Snack Edition. This was just a throwaway. I've seen her eat a lot of food in the car. Pretzels, Lara Bar, apples. This means nothing to no one, but like if you knew Blythe, she like literally only buys Lara bars in the car. And it's
Well,
just so
because they've got
pathetic.
5 ingredients, Emmy, and they're all real.
Unlike the apple.
So I'm
Apparently.
killing pretzels because they make your mouth too dry.
But you need salt.
Oh
Sorry.
yeah, so
when
this
you're
is-
hiking.
yeah. Emmy and I got told this by a ranger who was so far the opposite of the one who yelled at us for not knowing about cryptobiotic soil. I think he was trying to marry both of us. But he gave us these stickers of this guy vomiting Victor. This was at the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And vomiting Victor didn't put on sunscreen and didn't drink enough water and didn't eat salty snacks.
Don't be like vomiting Victor.
Yeah.
He's like kind of smiling while he's like throwing up though.
But when you sweat,
It's weird.
you sweat out all like your electrolytes and you
Yeah.
can like die of like water poisoning. So I'm killing the pretzels. I'm kissing the Lara bars because they are good, but I'm marrying the apple because you can plant an apple.
And it's one ingredient.
It's one ingredient and it's real.
Good one. Okay, last Kill Kiss Mary. Kill Kiss Mary Road Trip Musician Buddy Edition. Ooh, this one's about boys. Okay, Kill Kiss Mary, Harry Styles of Harry Styles, Robin Pecknold of Fleet Foxes, or Sam Shaborsky of Lady Bird.
I'm killing,
Sam, give
yeah.
a little wave. No, he won't.
I'm killing Harry Styles because he spit on Chris Pine.
False. Yeah.
I'm kissing Robin Pecknold of Fleet Foxes because I have a problematic parasocial relationship with him ever since he accidentally followed me on Instagram. And I'm marrying Sam.
Woo! Good answer. If she would have killed Sam, that would have still been funny. Okay, so we've talked about this before. I don't know if you mentioned your book, but I think it's worth mentioning here. The sexual confidence of national park rangers. What about it? Is this something will all of us ever be able to achieve? How do we get there?
I don't think we can. I think the thing that makes park rangers so hot is they know the name of every plant and they're outside all the time, so they're tan.
Whoa.
And they have authority.
They do have authority.
Yeah.
And they can deny your junior park ranger badge, which is essentially all the power.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all the power. Well, that's it for the games. I guess my next question and final question is, before we open it up for our friends, is what's next? You're on a book tour
I'm on a book tour. I'm going to be driving around the country again for a month. And
in said
in the Prius,
Prius.
which is parked outside.
Don't tell people that. Dude, you're doing it again.
Yeah, please come murder me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after that, we'll see. It's in God's hands.
Oh, cool. God is good. Well, that's it. Okay. We're gonna open up for questions. No one's told me that we're talking too long. No, she's giving the thumbs up. If anyone has any questions for Blythe or
Emmy or my mom.
or Sherry, yeah, we can take some of those questions. And
Yes. I did not listen to audiobooks. I find that when I try to take in information through my ears, it just bounces off. So I just listen to a lot of music instead. Because also I like to sing along to Joni Mitchell, but everyone hates when I do because I sound so bad. So it was nice to be alone and yeah.
Blythe doesn't listen to podcasts either.
I don't.
It's so weird. Because there'd be like 9-hour days, and I'm like, let's just listen to a podcast.
And I was
They're
like,
"No,
let's
just
listen to
no, again." I was like, oh my God. So yeah, no, I could just say that you don't listen to anything but music.
Any other questions? Yes. Yes, I actually made, because I was avoiding work, 4 playlists for this book, one for each section of the book. It starts with this song, Next Time by Laura Marling, which is the song that I accidentally listened to 300 times and it made me quit my job because it's like, it feels like a long time since I've been free are the lyrics. And I was like, it feels like a long time since I've been free. And yeah, so that was really big for me. I mean, my mom used to listen to the Chicks album, what's it called? Taking the Long Way. The one that they won a Grammy of the Year.
Right.
So there's one about like going on the road, like 6 strong hands on the steering wheel. So like definitely all of those Bruce Springsteen songs, any song about being in a car
Simon
is
and
great.
Garfunkel.
Yeah. Yeah. America makes me cry every time. Yeah, I will share the playlist with you. Yes. Ooh, okay. So my first national park from here, I went up to Isle Royal, which is you take a ferry off the UP. And I had never heard of it. My stepdad told me that he knew someone who lived on Isle Royal who had died from botulism because he was like living on Isle Royal secretly. So that was in my head. And then Tom was also like, there's too many moose and they're running amok. So I was very, very excited to go there. And it was an incredible experience. Like I just want to go back as soon as possible. And it has the lowest visitor rate of any park in the lower 48 states, but the highest return rate. So the people who go really love it. And then my last national park of the trip was Hot Springs in Arkansas, it's an urban park. It's like in I guess Hot Springs, Arkansas. And it's just surrounded by buildings and stuff. And then there's these old bathhouses that have existed for hundreds of years where people would go and bathe in the hot springs water. And it was nice. It's very interesting, but it was kind of an anticlimactic last park to go to for sure. Yes, way back there. Yeah, that's such a good question. I think it definitely was improved by writing about it because I got to like look at my photos and like talk to people that were there, and just thinking more deeply about it made it feel more meaningful than just like this thing that I sped through for 2 months. And I mean, this book took me a long time to write. I was like a year overdue. And part of that was COVID and just being like, it's hard to do work because the world is falling apart around us. But part of that was because actually, Emmy, it's one of the questions you asked me. The third or fourth chapter in here, I knew I wanted to talk about the history of the parks, but I don't know if other people had this experience growing up around here. Like in the public school I went to, they did not teach us anything about Indigenous history in America. We started because they were like, that's not going to be on the AP test. So we started at like, Plymouth Rock. So I knew I wanted to talk about that, but I didn't know very much. And the more I learned, like it's, horrible, gruesome things have happened and just so unjust. And there were times where I was like, should I be the person telling this story? Like, I'm just a white lady who like, has learned all this in recent history. And I also was like, should I be telling this because I'm like a humor writer and like it's pretty heavy? And I ultimately was like, well, I have an audience. Like there are people who will read this, and I wouldn't put a book out that doesn't talk about this. And like if I can, help other people who like similarly were not taught this to learn about it, like that's worthwhile. And then for the humor bit of it, I was reading an interview with Ethan Hawke, as I do so often for fun because I'm in love with him. And he was talking about the Good Lord Bird, his show about Harper's Ferry. And he was like, yeah, when I told people that I was going to be making a show about slavery, people were like, oof, you're going to have to be really serious and really respectful about that. And when I thought about it, actually the most respectful thing I could do was make a show that people actually wanted to watch. And the show was really funny and really weird. So I was like, you know what? I feel the same way. Like the most respectful thing I can do is write a book with jokes in it that like people will read and will, educate people. So yeah, but that was really hard. That took me like 9 months to get there. So any other, yeah, Pete. Okay, I'm gonna kill Jack Kerouac because he's already dead and he can't stop me. I'll kiss Bill Bryson, but just like a little grandfather kiss. And I will marry John Krakauer because I follow him on Instagram and he's always like climbing. He's just like got up at 5 a.m. to climb my favorite peak. It seems like a good life.
That was a good question.
Yeah, Jordy. Hi. Okay, I would say definitely quit your job.
But he's an educator.
Quit your job. Yeah, I have not regretted. And then, well, I mean, I definitely have no money now, but you know what? Money comes, money goes. And then I took notes during the trip for sure. I didn't write anything really out in prose. I just was like, this happened, like try to remember all the things that happened. So that was kind of nice. I got to like reconstruct the narrative in my writing of it. And I also really truly like I don't really have a very visual memory. Emmy's always telling me like, oh, remember XYZ thing that happened? And I was like, that never happened. And then other people are like, that happened. So I looked back through my Instagrams and like my Instagram story archive, and it was like fun to relive the trip that way.
You like journaled though. I remember.
I did journal.
You
I
would
would
journal on the trip.
but it, boring journals. Sheila Heedy, this I guess, memoirist, auto fiction writer, did this thing in the New York Times recently where she took all of her journals from 10 years and alphabetized every sentence and then like edited it down and like submitted it as this beautiful piece of weird memoir fiction. And I tried to do that and I was just like, oh, my journals are so boring. Like nothing in here is poetic. It's all just like, Ian texted me this. That's the whole day. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, wow. God, what a good question. I mean, I think, God, to be from a place, I definitely claim, like, I'm quick to claim places as where I'm from. Like, I definitely, like, especially since moving out east. Technically, I grew up in Illinois. My parents are divorced, and my mom lived in Illinois. My dad lived in Wisconsin. So I kind of just, depending on my mood, say I'm from Illinois, from Wisconsin, from the border of Illinois and Wisconsin. But just, I feel like since moving out to New York, where I also would say I'm from, there's something about, I think, and I kind of got to this in the book, but just like becoming invested in the community and like to the question about like the ecology of where I'm from, I always thought of New York as like this completely urban, there is no nature here. Like if I want to be in nature, I have to like catch the train out to like the mountains and then hike the same trail that everyone is hiking. And I felt very divorced from nature, but I started thinking about, okay, there's all this national public land, all these national parks, but there's a lot of like state and local public land too. Like obviously like my love of nature started in the Wisconsin state park system. And in New York City, I live a 10-minute walk from 2 local parks. And there's, you know, like the nature there is not as breathtaking as the nature, you know, in Zion, but it's the nature I actually interact with. And so I started learning about trees, like learning how to identify trees. And like I went to my first tree care event a couple of weeks ago where we just like picked up all like the trash that people throw on the tree beds and like break up the soil because it's so compacted water can't get in, and then we composted it. And just like actually caring about the nature around me has like made me feel more connected to the place for sure. And also it just feels like, if I don't know, I don't want to say anything corny and dumb, but I just do feel like if more people like paid attention to like the nature and where they actually live, instead of being like, okay, nature is this pristine thing that exists somewhere else where I don't live, and where like if it was really pristine, no humans would be there. Like I think that's actually, even though those people love nature and that's why they're saying that, I think that's counterproductive to saving nature, because like humans exist, we are going to continue existing, and we use nature and we live in it. And understanding the ways that humans and nature are connected, I think is a lot better way forward with our problems.
Yeah. And if you have kids or plan on having kids, like starting them young, investing them in like nature, like we went to every like local park, every state park growing up, and did these weird nature programs that like our parents or step parents dragged us to, but like it has instilled this like love and appreciation for nature that like you've carried on. And yeah.
And you, the urban beekeeper.
The urban beekeeper, it's true.
Okay, cool. So thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah.